Today's cocktail is the Salty John. The Salty John is a whiskey-based cocktail consisting of 1 1/4 ounce of whiskey and 6 ounces of grapefruit juice, poured together into an ice-filled highball glass. This isn't a drink I've ever had, and it's hard for me in my mind to picture the combination of whiskey and grapefruit juice, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, and it seems like something a sailor might drink. So if you've got your sea legs under you and you can drink responsibly, I highly recommend the Salty John. What up, what up? It's your boy, the Killer Bee, the Fat Man, the Africanized Honeybee, the at google.com, at Gmail, on Yahoo, not on Yahoo, on YouTube. Sorry, I've been drinking. I've got a rum and coke sitting here staring at me right now. Laughing at me in the background is my fabulous co-host, May. What's up, May?
Howdy, party people.
DJ Smurf.
Not Yahoo. Ooh, that's like a straight Freudian
DJ
slip.
Smurf, that brings
I was listening to a playlist on Spotify that had, there it is, on a playlist.
Yeah, Southern bass.
I'm like, why is
Late
this
90s and the rise of Southern bass.
Yeah, it was about Outkast and their rise, and it was sort of their link to Southern hip hop, and you had paying tribute to, like, you know, Luke and that whole early Atlanta sound.
You don't know about the So Def Bass All Stars.
A little bit.
Jermaine Dupri.
I think of you. I want to be your baby.
A-Town Players.
Ready.
Lil Jon. Trick
Right.
Daddy.
The early years.
Luke's. DJ Magic Mike. Two Live Crew.
Two Live Crew.
Two Live.
Gosh.
I saw them on Donahue. You young people don't know who Phil Donahue is. When I was in high school, Phil Donahue before Oprah, before Sally Jesse Raphael, before Jenny Jones, before Ricky Lake, before Jerry Springer, before Maury Povich, before Montel, there was Phil Donahue. And Phil Donahue covered every possible subject you can imagine. The first time in my life I saw the Two Live Crew, that I saw black women in thongs shaking their was on the Phil Donahue show at 4:30 in the afternoon on broadcast television. Because Phil believed in, if nothing else, Phil believed in the First Amendment.
He did. That he did.
I was like, oh my, and I was high school age already, but still, I was like, oh my God, I had never seen anything like that before. Oh. I still ain't, well, yeah, I had. Let me shut up.
It was a thing.
But tonight we are going to talk about, or today, this evening, this episode, we are going to discuss my very first car. Now, I did not own this car, but it is the car that I drove for many years. It's a 1988 Hyundai Excel GLS 5-door, charcoal gray with pinstripes, and it had 5-speed manual transmission. Me and that car went through some stuff. That car was, now of course you knew, when you knew me in college, this was the car that I drove. But let's go through the history of this car. My parents bought that car brand new in 1988. We had just moved, and my parents wanted a second car, and that was the cheapest model available in the United States at the time. So they bought one. Hell, I think they paid cash for it.
I mean,
that was my mom's commuter car to get to work, and where she worked was, I don't think it was 5 full miles from the house. I mean, it was literally just outside of easy bicycle distance, like, you know, where you wouldn't even break a good sweat getting there.
Right.
But, you know, it was literally just her runabout. So for the first couple of years, she owned
the Rudy Poo car.
It barely, I mean, like, I think they said before I went to college, that car left the county once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I learned to drive on that car because my parents were adamant that I would learn how to drive on a 5-speed. I could not take my driver test until I had mastered the 3-pedal and the stick shift.
Do kids even learn how to drive 5 speeds anymore?
I don't even know. I have a friend.
Shoot.
I have a friend right now, and his oldest is approaching learner permit age, and I don't believe they have ever, as they've been married 20 years, and I don't think as a family they've ever owned a car that had a manual transmission. Come to think of it, he's never owned a car that had a manual transmission since I've known him in college.
Yeah, neither have I. But I did learn in college how to drive a 5-speed.
See, I stay on.
I'm rusty, but Okay.
You know, my Z's got a manual transmission. My Stinger's got a manual transmission. I keep a car with a manual transmission because that's just who I am. It's part of my. I'll put it this way: my dad once had to tell me, "Son, you ain't Mario Andretti, and this ain't no race car." And he was talking about that Hyundai because I learned how to heel toe. I learned how to heel toe downshift in that damn Hyundai. Yeah.
Hyundai.
I learned how to do a handbrake turn in that Hyundai. So that car was my driver test car. That was my prom car. That was my graduation night car. That was my first time going to college, moving myself in car. First time I ever girl in a car.
Wow. I can't even imagine being that flexible anymore.
Well, because I mean, no, seriously, I drove that car. I operated that car from the time I had even before my learner's permit, because before I started formally learning how to drive, they would have me like learn how to ease the clutch back and forth in the driveway. Our driveway had a slight incline, so my dad was like, "No brakes, just roll it back and forth up the driveway." And that was frustrating because I stalled that thing so many times. But so if you can imagine, from 15 years old until I finished college and started working at 23. Yeah, I was 23. So 8 years, that car was my car, so to speak. Because I can count on one hand the number of times I got to drive the good car. So
right.
For the piece of car that it was, because it was a piece of, let me tell you. Later I'm going to go through all the things that broke on that car. But through those 8 years and a couple of wrecks, and my sister I learned how to drive on it. My sister learned how to drive on it. I had my first wreck in it. My sister had her first wreck in it.
Oh, damn.
In fact, I had my first, second, third. Was that a fourth? Well, we won't call that a wreck. My first parking lot, nobody was here to see that, so I'm just going to leave situation, was also in that car. It failed 3 or 4 clutches, maybe 5. Brakes a couple times, a heater core, transmission, a rocker arm, a water pump. Did I say fuel pump?
Nope, not yet.
Fuel pump. That car left me stranded by the roadside many a time.
And is this after it became a certain age, or was it a problem sort of from the beginning, or by the time you inherited it?
By the time I inherited
the Festiva, and
yes,
it was
so
past its prime.
Yes, that was the thing. So they bought that car brand new in 1988, and by 1992, when I really started driving it, it was past its prime. And again, 2 teenagers were learning how to drive on it. But it, the clutch was an issue because it basically only ever saw stop and go traffic. Mm-hmm. It had almost no until I went to college, it had almost no highway miles on it at all. Everything was stop lights and, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or actually it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it barely even got into 5th gear because we were already driving in town, especially on the base. On base, the speed limit was 25 in most places. So you don't work up any speed, and there's stop signs and stop lights everywhere. So it had a lot of wear and tear on it despite having relatively low miles. Right. Some of the mechanical issues were just the fact that it was a cheap car. It was poorly made by a relatively low paid labor with cheap parts. And that's just the reality of the situation. But the other piece of it was, especially once I got to college, and at that part of my life, I wasn't doing regular maintenance. So oil changes were when I was home on break. Brake pads were when I was home on break. But at the same time, I learned how to work on cars because of that car. The first time I ever changed brake pads were on that car. The first time I ever changed oil was that car. The first time I ever changed a tire was on that car. Changing air filter, light, headlamp bulbs, all those windshield wipers, all those kind of little personal maintenance things that people learn how to do on their cars. I learned all that stuff on that car. The first car stereo I ever installed was on that car. And let me tell you, I mean, I fried one.
I'll say, do people still even do that? Like,
I crossed wires and fried a CD player. Like, I literally let the magic smoke out. It went pfft, and a puff of smoke came out of the dashboard. And I was like, oh, that's not good. But my first amplifier, my first 15-inch bass tube, my first dual 18-inch subwoofer. Oh my God, I can't hear myself think stereo was built in that car. I personally hand built 2 plywood enclosures to fit in the hatch of that car. My dad said it was the worst money I ever spent, and how could I be so stupid? But, you know, parts for that car were cheap. They were relatively easy to find. It had little cheap 13-inch tires that I could get at Sears for, you know, $25 if they were on sale.
Rolling on 13s.
You know, because, oh my God, in college, I mean, I backed over a bottle. Somebody put a damn beer bottle in my car. I backed over the bottle and popped my tire. My senior year, when I had that job down in the next county where I was doing the drafting work, this was after you met me when I was living in that apartment up in the north part of that city. My water pump went out. Like the seals to the water pump went out, to where like I would pour water in the top of the radiator and I could see it running out of the side of the engine. But it was cheap. To put that in the shop and fix it was a couple $100. The night you and I went on our first quote-unquote date, we'll say social outing.
Social outing.
I dropped you back at the dorm, and while I was on my way back to my apartment, I got hit.
Yeah.
And just dumb luck, because we had been taking pictures that evening. I had my camera with me. I was able to take pictures of the damage and her car and my car and where the cars were sitting in the intersection. Not that I needed any of that stuff. When the cop got there, it was pretty easy to see who had done what. I'm not gonna call any names, but somebody ran a light and hit me. But you know, that was when I was a court boy, when I used to keep a basketball in the hatch at all times, because you never knew when a game of basketball might break.
Yes, youth.
You know, all my youthful, early teen, early 20s stuff surrounded that car, and for that reason, despite the fact that it was a car, I have a lot of positive memories associated with it. But after I graduated school in December of '97, I drove it January, February, and part of March, and that's when I bought the Stinger. And at the next available opportunity, my parents came and got it from me, and that was that.
That was it.
Except that wasn't it, because they sent it to law school with my sister.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and she drove it. So she drove it for her 3 years of law school. And then she sold it, although it got towed and impounded because the guy never came and got the car. She got her money, though. I'm like, he paid you for the car.
He paid you and then never came and got it?
He took the key. Yep. And then it got towed before he came back and got it? Yep.
Okay.
But, and it was having clutch problems when she sold it, actually. Although I think that was a master cylinder issue. I don't think it was the transmission itself. But yeah, me and that car had a lot of things, like the time that we had the brake pads changed and the guy at the shop didn't retighten the fitting, so all the brake fluid leaked out over the next 3 or 4 days.
Oops.
And the time that we had the oil change and they didn't put the plug back in the transmission properly. No, it was a clutch. I'm sorry. We had the clutch changed, and they didn't put oil in the transmission, so the transmission seized while I was on my way back to school, because, you know, I was an RA and I had to go back early.
Yikes.
So the transmission seizes on the highway, and I can tell you where: Randolph County, North Carolina, Highway 421, northbound.
That does
about
not
3
sound
miles
like a
outside of
pleasant
Siler
place to
City.
be.
I had to walk. Everything I owned was in that car, because, you know, dorm moved in. Well, everything except my stereo. But I had to leave the car, and in 1996 there were no cell phones. I had to walk 3 miles. It wasn't It was 3. It was 3 miles to downtown to the gas station I got to. It wasn't 3 full miles, but I had to walk down a country road in January with a dog following me.
Ooh.
Because the dog, every time I turned my back on the dog, he would try to sneak up on me. I thought that was hilarious. But I get to the gas station. I pull out the calling card. I call Dad. I say, Dad, the car quit. I think the transmission seized. He's like, well, I can't come till after work. So I called Mom. Mom said, okay, I'm going to take off work. I'll come get you. Mom comes to get me in the minivan, deposits me on campus, goes back. Dad comes to get the car. He tows it home with his truck a couple of days later. Turns out the transmission has seized because the last company to service it did not refill the transmission with oil after they had it off to change the clutch. So we got a free transmission out of that. Of course, it was a junkyard transmission, but whatever, it worked. What happened next? There was a fender bender in that city where we went to college. Nothing bad though, not too bad.
We just a little something.
We filed a police report, but we didn't fix the car. It was just ugly. We kept driving it. There was the time it was Christmas break and we were coming home and the fuel pump failed. Now, here's the deal. My sister had an exam. I was done. My sister had one more exam. So I went to the mall to buy Christmas presents. I'll never forget. I went to the African American art store in that mall.
That place.
That place, yeah. And then I was on my way home. So that mall's on a hill, and you're coming down the hill under the interstate.
Yeah.
And I was coming down the hill, and my car was decelerating. I was on the gas. I was going downhill, and the car was decelerating. I was like, "Oh, that's not good."
Not good at all.
So I pulled into. There's a restaurant there. In those days, I think it might have been Chi-Chi's.
Oh yeah, that restaurant has changed iterations several times.
Yes, right there by where my house used to be.
Yeah.
Or that house I used to live in. It's down there by Meadowview. So I pull in there and I figure out that the engine will start, but whenever I give it gas, it dies. And what we eventually figured out was because the fuel pump had gone bad. Because it would get enough fuel to idle, but it could not get enough fuel to actually run. So whenever I opened the throttle, it would just stall because there wasn't enough fuel. So once again, Dad had to come up and, they double teamed it. Mom brought the minivan to load up me and my sister to get us out of the dorm. And then Dad came up with his truck and we towed it back home so we could get it fixed. And just imagine that over and over again. When the clutch failed once, I was at school, so I had to drive it home with a bad clutch.
Right.
When the rocker arm failed, that was hilarious. The rocker arm failed. I was actually on my way to school when the rocker arm broke. I didn't know what it was. I just knew the engine was vibrating real bad. Well, it was vibrating real bad because it was only running on 3 cylinders. So then I had to drive it back to on 3 cylinders. Did I had to drive it back home on 3 cylinders. With a maximum speed of about 45 miles an hour. Now in those days, well, no, because in those days that was a state highway and it was under construction because they were changing it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and it went through several cities. So in reality,
you couldn't
speed limit was 45 miles an hour most of the way anyway. Once I got south of like Randolph County, but in the places where it was 55, I couldn't do 55. I literally did not have enough horsepower to go that fast. But despite all of that, me and that car had a really good, like I said, I have a lot of positive memories associated with that car because that was the car I drove from the time I was 15 until the time I was 23. So, every homecoming, every girlfriend, every prom, like all that stuff, all those sort of milestone events that you have at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 were surrounding that car. So that's the story of my 1988 Hyundai Excel.
Oh, the Hyundai.
Yeah. Thank you for watching Cocktails and Crankshafts. If you enjoy my content, please like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell icon. and we'll see you soon with new content.